Listen for a moment to the quiet beneath your thoughts, the soft place you rarely visit because the day keeps pulling you outward. Feel your shoulders loosening a fraction, the breath arriving a little deeper. Maybe you've been running hard, chasing targets that keep moving, climbing a ladder that leans against a wall you never chose. Maybe the numbers look decent, but the nights are noisier, the heart more tired, the mind more scattered. I see that. I honor that. There is another kind of wealth, one that begins inside, travels through your decisions, and only then shows up in the visible world. Not quick, not loud, real. There is a name that still carries a quiet authority across centuries. Solomon, not because of palaces or power, but because he asked for the one thing that makes everything else work: wisdom, the invisible architecture that holds a life together when storms come. Think of a tree you can almost smell, grounded, patient, roots drinking deep. Fruit is beautiful, yes, but fruit without roots rots fast. Wisdom is the root system. Wealth of peace, of clarity, of relationships, of resources is the fruit that arrives in its season. When the order is wrong, the tree starves. When the order is right, the tree nourishes. You may feel the tug-of-war inside. Part of you is calm and clear. Part of you is wired and wary. Emotional neuroscience names it: the amygdala scanning for threats, the prefrontal cortex trying to plan, the nervous system stuck in on-off cycles of adrenaline. When fear pilots your choices, urgency becomes the compass. You move faster and understand less. Wisdom slows the breath and widens the map. It calms the alarm long enough for truth to speak. This is practical spirituality, a soul steady enough to give the brain better data, a body settled enough to let the heart choose well. Notice how life compounds. A wise choice today is not just a single win, it's a reduction in future fires. Fewer fires mean fewer frantic repairs, and fewer frantic repairs mean more attention for what actually matters. That's neuroplasticity in motion, repeated wise patterns carving safer pathways in the mind, steady rhythms teaching your body that peace is not a rare visitor, but a trusted friend. Wisdom pays interest by preventing losses you never see, the arguments that never ignite, the debts you never create, the detours you never have to take. This is not about guilt, not about shame, not about proving you're spiritual enough or smart enough. This is about order. When the inner world is rightly ordered, the outer world becomes easier to pilot. Integrity stops being a burden and turns into a shield. Counsel stops feeling like weakness and starts functioning like a compass. Diligence stops looking like punishment and becomes the quiet power that makes momentum predictable. Guarding the heart stops sounding abstract and becomes the boundary that protects your attention, the most expensive currency you own. Mastery of the tongue stops being moralism and becomes engineering, the skill of building futures with words. Take a breath and feel your attention return to you. Feel how the body responds to simple clarity. Shoulders descend, jaw loosens, eyes soften. Your nervous system loves predictability. Your soul loves meaning. Wisdom gives both. It brings the scattered pieces of you to a common table and invites them to work together. The hurried part of you can sit down. The fearful part of you can exhale. The ambitious part of you can be retrained to serve rather than rule. When these parts align, decisions begin to fit, like well-cut stones in a wall that will stand for generations. Imagine a room with warm light and a long wooden table. At the head sits an elder with weathered hands and eyes that do not rush. He doesn't sell hope. He reveals patterns. He doesn't flatter, he frees. He speaks in pictures because truth lands better when it can be seen. A tree whose fruit arrives because its roots are healthy. A scale that balances cleanly because no hidden weights distort the measurement. An ant that looks small and insignificant, yet moves with a strategy that never needs applause. A heart that is a spring, sending clear water when it is guarded. A tongue that can bless and build, or cut and collapse. The images are simple, so their impact can be deep. If part of you thinks, "I've tried before," let that part be heard and still be invited forward. Trying without wisdom is exhausting. Trying with wisdom is different. It's planned, it's paced, it's supported, it's honest. It respects limits and therefore expands possibility. Where urgency once sprinted and stumbled, rhythm now walks and arrives. Where cynicism once protected you from disappointment, discernment now protects you from deception. Where noise once masqueraded as progress, quiet now reveals the next right step. So let the restless place inside you unclench, because what comes next is not theory floating above your life. It is counsel you can hold in your hands. It will meet you in the calendar, in the budget, in the conversation you've been postponing. It will meet you in the inbox, in the kitchen, in the commute, in the place where you choose to speak or to stay silent. Wisdom begins within and blossoms outward. Wisdom grows roots before it grows branches. Wisdom simplifies the path by clarifying the person who walks it. And as the room grows still, hear a question that comes like a gentle bell. What if the richest wisdom in history is not about money, but about decisions that print compound interest across your entire life? Let that sentence sit in your chest. Let it travel through your breath. Let it stand at the doorway of your next choice. Because the kind of enrichment that does not erode begins here, in the unseen places where attention is guarded, counsel is welcomed, integrity is chosen, diligence is practiced, plans are prepared, the heart is protected, and the tongue speaks life. Across the centuries, the name Solomon travels like a steady lantern through rooms where people are tired of noise and hungry for clarity. The story that remains is not merely of a king with resources, but of a human being who understood that insight is the true architecture of a life. That center of gravity matters because enrichment that begins with appearance ends with anxiety, while enrichment that begins with wisdom grows roots, then branches, then fruit. The sequence changes everything. Roots before fruit, order before output, inner coherence before outer success. When the order is right, pressure lowers, choices align, and the heart no longer pays for victories that look good and feel empty. A lens is chosen before a picture is taken, and the lens determines what becomes sharp. Through Solomon's lens, the sharp places are counsel, integrity, diligence, thoughtful planning, the guarded heart, and a tongue that builds rather than burns. Money, achievements, applause, these do not vanish. They simply stop pretending to be first. This lens does not shrink ambition. It redeems it. It turns drive into direction. It turns desire into design. It turns a restless hunger for more into a focused hunger for what truly multiplies life. There is a bodily intelligence that recognizes this order even before the mind names it. When meaning increases, breath deepens. When coherence rises, shoulders descend. Emotional neuroscience describes what the spirit has long practiced. A calmer limbic system widens the field of vision. A regulated nervous system returns choice to the prefrontal cortex. Repeatable wise patterns lay down safer neural pathways. The result is not a mood, but a capacity, more space between stimulus and response, more light in the room where decisions are made, more strength to hold a long view when short-term spikes call for attention. Through this lens, enrichment is not a jackpot, but a harvest, not a lucky break, but a patterned outcome. Harvest requires seasons, patterns require practice. Practice requires a center that does not wobble with the news cycle or the market's weather. This is where Solomon's voice is gently uncompromising. He does not charm, he sorts. He separates glitter from gold, shortcuts from strategy, talking from truth. The sorting is tender because it is simple, and it is firm because it is true. When a life is sorted, energy stops leaking through hidden cracks. What once felt like a mystery of constant loss reveals itself as the cost of disorder, now replaced by the gain of alignment. Consider how this lens transforms familiar tensions. Independence, celebrated without wisdom, becomes isolation. Through Solomon's lens, it becomes interdependence, strengthened by counsel, sharpened by perspective. Hustle, praised without wisdom, becomes burnout. Through Solomon's lens, it becomes diligence, steady systems that move quietly and far. Morality, performed without wisdom, becomes performance. Through Solomon's lens, it becomes integrity, uncomplicated alignment between what is measured and what is true. Speech, casual without wisdom, becomes collateral damage. Through Solomon's lens, it becomes construction, language chosen like materials for a home meant to last. Every part of life begins to echo the same cadence, slow enough to see, clear enough to choose, consistent enough to compound. Compounding is the quiet miracle at the heart of this tradition. Wisdom compounds in the prevented conflict, in the deal that doesn't require repair, in the trust that does not need constant proof. It compounds in the calm that returns after honest boundaries are kept, in the time recovered when planning stops last-minute fires, in the friendships that deepen because the tongue no longer spends what the heart cannot afford. The gain is not always loud, but it is real, and it adds up in ways spreadsheets struggle to capture. There is compassion in this lens because it understands how people fracture under pressure. Many carry the ache of past attempts, effort without insight, hustle without rest, virtue without joy. This path does not dismiss that ache. It dignifies it. It says the exhaustion made sense given the tools available at the time, and it offers better tools. It says the mind did its best while the nervous system was braced, and it shows how safety and truth can work together. It says the soul is not late, it is ready. From that kindness, firmness can stand. Alignment matters, order matters, character matters, words matter. Gentle does not mean vague. Compassion can be clear. So the question is not whether life can be enriched. Life enriches whenever wise patterns meet faithful time. The question is, which patterns are being multiplied by the attention given today? Through Solomon's lens, attention is treasure, counsel is leverage, integrity is security, diligence is momentum, planning is mercy toward the future, the guarded heart is a spring, and the tongue is a set of tools that either repair or ruin. Seen this way, even ordinary days become consequential. Small choices stop being small because they are placed into sequences that carry them forward. Standing here, the path ahead feels different. Not because it removes complexity, but because it introduces order. The lens is chosen. The picture can now come into focus. As the narrative unfolds, 7 teachings will surface again and again, not as slogans, but as structures. The tree and its fruit, the circle of counsel, the honest scale, the quiet ant, the prepared plan, the watched heart, the measured word. Their simplicity holds depth, their depth holds relief. The weight shifts from the shoulders to the foundations, from frantic effort to wise design, from scattered trying to coherent becoming. Before the path divides into subtopics, the ground itself speaks in 7 clear sentences, each one a beam of light you can feel more than see. They are not slogans, they are sequences. Each one rearranges the order of things inside you, and when the order changes, the outcomes must eventually follow. Listen to the cadence of these lines and notice how your breath begins to match their rhythm, how your body softens around the possibility of a different way to move through the world. Seek wisdom before wealth. Wisdom is the tree, wealth is the fruit. When wisdom moves to the front of the line, pressure drops because direction stops depending on what is loud and starts depending on what is true. In the nervous system, this feels like the shoulders lowering and the jaw unclenching. In the calendar, it looks like fewer reactive scrambles and more grounded choices. Fruit does not argue with seasons. Fruit arrives when roots are fed. The pursuit changes shape, from chasing outcomes to nourishing the source from which outcomes grow. Honor counsel. Many advisors shorten your learning curve. Isolation stretches pain across years. Perspective compresses it into insight that can be carried today. A circle of counsel becomes a living mirror that reflects blind spots without humiliation and multiplies options without chaos. In emotional terms, Your inner alarms calm when trusted voices help you map the terrain. The brain regains access to longer-range thinking, and decisions stop feeling like cliff edges and start feeling like well-marked paths. Integrity protects. Honest scales attract trust and opportunity. There is a safety that money cannot purchase and applause cannot fake, the quiet safety of alignment. When the measure is honest, energy stops leaking into pretense and repair. People breathe easier around you. Deals require less insurance. Your own mind stops rehearsing explanations. Integrity is not about appearing good. It is about living in a way that does not require a second life to manage the first. Diligence beats hustle. Steady ants outlast sprinters. The body knows the difference between adrenaline spikes and sustainable strength. Hustle outputs heat. Diligence outputs heat and light. Small, repeatable motions gather power the way rivers gather force by staying their course. Over time, consistency becomes a friend you can lean on. Not dramatic, not theatrical, simply faithful. Enough to carry work forward on ordinary days when motivation is thin and applause is elsewhere. Plan before you act. Thoughtful strategy prevents costly rework. A few minutes at the front end can save hours at the back end, and the saved hours are not empty. They become the margin that protects relationships, rest, and creativity. Planning is not control. Planning is mercy for the future version of you who would otherwise inherit avoidable fires. The brain likes this mercy. It relaxes the threat sensors, invites clarity, and opens space for deeper focus once the work begins. Guard your heart. Attention shapes direction and destiny. Where attention goes, your inner compass tilts. Guarding the heart is not building walls. It is choosing gates. It is deciding which voices become neighbors and which become passing noises. When the heart is tended, the emotional soil stays fertile for clarity, compassion, and courage. Choices become less about proving something and more about protecting something precious, the capacity to love, to perceive, to stay present. Master your tongue. Words build or break your future. Language is not decoration. Language is construction. Words join together like beams and bricks. They hold weight, or they collapse under it. In the nervous system, words either inflame alarms or settle them. In relationships, words either bridge distances or widen them. Over months and years, sentences spoken in honesty and care become architecture you can live inside without fear of collapse. Taken together, these 7 sentences function like a map that prefers the long view, a map that refuses shortcuts disguised as gifts. Notice the symmetry: roots before fruit, counsel before isolation, alignment before acceleration, consistency before spectacle, design before motion, guarded attention before scattered effort, careful language before heavy consequences. This symmetry brings relief because it restores order. It brings courage because it clarifies what genuinely multiplies life. As these lines continue to echo, the next movement of the journey will move from the broad horizon to the close-up details where pain eases and practice begins to compound. The horizon has been named, and something in you has already shifted. A little more air in the chest, a little more room between thought and choice. The 7 lines keep ringing like tuned bells, and with each tone the body remembers what steadiness feels like. This is the quiet threshold where a map becomes a path. Not louder, not faster, simply closer. Wisdom is moving from the sky into the soil, from the page into the pulse, from ideas into the small places where a day is actually lived. As we step nearer, the light narrows in a kind way. It does not interrogate, it illuminates. The nervous system softens as meaning grows specific, because specificity reduces threat. The mind can see what the heart can hold. What once felt abstract comes home to textures you recognize: money and peace, solitude and counsel, shortcuts and trust, energy and rest, attention and speech. Each subtopic will carry 1 or 2 beams of this light, and you may notice how relief arrives not only as comfort, but as clarity. Fewer moving parts, fewer hidden leaks, fewer arguments with reality. Let the pace remain unhurried and the tone remain kind. The path ahead will not add weight, it will redistribute it. The next movement is the beginning of enrichment at the root, where the order of things returns to its rightful sequence and the tree remembers how to feed itself before it tries to feed the world. There is a certain ache that visits high performers late at night, the sense of running fast inside a maze that keeps rearranging itself. Income increases, yet rest does not. The calendar fills, yet meaning thins. The body keeps the score, a chest that forgets how to open, a jaw that wakes already clenched, a nervous system living on bright bursts of urgency and dull waves of depletion. Underneath the spreadsheets and the plans sits a simple grief. The pursuit of more has cost pieces of you that felt non-negotiable at the beginning. That grief deserves a gentler map. The expectation quietly breaks here. Wisdom compounds faster than money because it interrupts the loop of repeated mistakes. Fewer avoidable fires today mean fewer repairs tomorrow. Fewer repairs create margin. Margin turns into clarity. Clarity improves decisions. Better decisions prevent the next round of fires. Emotional neuroscience recognizes this compounding. When threat levels drop, the prefrontal cortex reclaims the helm. Working memory steadies, and the brain can choose long-term outcomes without being hijacked by short-term alarms. The inner economy improves first, and the outer economy follows. An old sentence comes with surprising warmth. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom. She yields better return than gold. The language is agricultural and financial at once, which is its brilliance. It speaks in gardens and ledgers. The image underneath is a tree that knows its order. Roots first, fruit in season. Fruit matters. Fruit feeds families and futures. Yet fruit without roots is theater. Wisdom tends the unseen structures that make nourishment reliable. When the hidden parts are healthy, outcomes stop depending on luck and start behaving like harvest. Some keep a small ritual for this hidden tending, and it looks ordinary enough to be missed. A quiet chair, an open page, 15 unhurried minutes they call proverb pairing. One ancient line is read slowly, letting the words settle like soil around tender roots. Then a single, honest sentence is written, an application for the next few hours, not for the next decade. The nervous system likes this scale. It relaxes around something specific and near. The mind likes this clarity. It recognizes a micro-design that will live inside the day rather than float above it. Over time, these short pairings behave like gentle carpenters, squaring the frame so the house can carry weight. Language participates in this enrichment. As the hand forms an application sentence, the tongue begins to practice it. Words become small rails that guide motion, not commands barked at the self, but friendly boundaries that make direction easier to keep. Neuroscience again adds light here. Spoken intention recruits attention. Attention recruits behavior. Repeated behavior writes patterns. Patterns write identity. This is where a preview whispers from another teaching. The tongue will eventually build what the heart believes. When the inner sentence is wise, action finds a wiser groove. A question lingers, not as an accusation, but as a key. Where did pursuing money first make you poorer in peace? Memory answers in images. A deal that felt wrong but went forward. A month when rest became rumor. A conversation where words spent trust faster than profit could replace it. Those memories are not verdicts. They are teachers. They reveal the price of roots neglected and the promise of roots restored. Seen through this lens, enrichment starts to change temperature. It becomes warm rather than hot, steady rather than spiky. The body begins to understand that success need not be paid for with pieces of the soul. The map is not glamorous, but it is kind. Nourish the root, and the fruit will know what to do. As that kindness takes hold, the horizon tilts toward the next light on the path, where isolation loosens and perspective begins to shorten the long road back to clarity. There is a quiet fatigue that comes from carrying decisions alone, the kind that looks functional from the outside, but hums like static inside the chest. Isolation turns small choices into cliff edges. Decision fatigue blurs the horizon until every path feels equally risky. Echo chambers form not because people love flattery, but because the nervous system seeks relief wherever it can find it, even if the relief is shallow. The cost is subtle. Perspective narrows, options collapse, and the inner voice grows either harsh or hesitant, sometimes both in the same hour. This is where pain has been living. Isolation, decision fatigue, echo chambers, and it deserves tenderness before it receives truth. The expectation that shatters with kindness is simple and strong. Independence is not strength. Strategic dependence on counsel accelerates growth. The body recognizes the truth in that sentence before the mind fully agrees, because the nervous system settles when it is not the only instrument playing. Emotional neuroscience traces the arc. Shared perspective reduces perceived threat, lowers cortisol spikes, and returns cognitive resources to long-range planning. With counsel, the prefrontal cortex is invited back into the room. With counsel, working memory stops drowning in what-ifs and starts sorting possibilities with nuance. Ancient wisdom gives the frame words have been searching for. Plans succeed with many advisors. The clarity here is not theoretical, it is structural. Many advisors mean many angles, many experiences, many temperaments bringing their light to the same table. The effect is humbling without humiliation, strengthening without spectacle. Counsel does not erase responsibility. It refines it. It does not silence intuition, it tunes it. It does not slow momentum. It protects it from running off the road that clarity would never have chosen. Healthy lives often reveal a recurring shape that is easy to draw and easier to forget. Many discover the strength of a simple frame. Build a counsel circle of 3. One elder, one peer, one specialist. Schedule a 20-minute check-in. The phrase names a pattern more than it issues an order. It describes a rhythm that lowers pressure by distributing wisdom. An elder steadies with long sight. A peer normalizes the present tension without trivializing it. And a specialist introduces precision that keeps problems from masquerading as mysteries. 20 minutes becomes a boundary that respects time while multiplying clarity. The nervous system reads the boundary as safety. The calendar reads it as sustainability. Honor moves through this circle like electricity. Teaching should too honor counsel. To honor counsel is not to outsource discernment. It is to widen it. It is to recognize that blind spots are not moral failures. They are the price of being human. Inside this honor, vulnerability stops feeling like exposure and starts feeling like alignment. People who have nothing to prove become the safest mirrors, and in those mirrors you see both your strength and your slant. Strength can be leveraged. Slant can be corrected. The outcome is gentler decisions that travel farther because they were not born alone. There is a marked difference between noise and chorus. Noise inflames, chorus harmonizes. In the brain, chorus looks like reduced amygdala hijacks and increased cognitive flexibility. In relationships, chorus sounds like fewer defensives and more honest revisions. Over time, a counsel-shaped life experiences fewer violent swings between overconfidence and paralysis. Choices gain texture. Risks are still taken, but they are taken with eyes open and safety lines tied to people who love truth more than comfort. A final question enters softly and aims for the place where relief and courage meet. Who are your 3 counselors, and what is each for? When that question is answered, even tentatively, something in the body exhales. The road ahead does not shorten by magic, it steadies by design. In that steadiness, growth accelerates not because you hurry, but because you are no longer walking alone. Few tensions cut as deeply as the quiet fear of being too honest to win. It begins with a small compromise that feels harmless, then a second that feels necessary, then a third that feels like the price of survival. The body notices rises before the mind admits it, a background hum of vigilance, sleep that never quite restores, the subtle dread of being asked questions you would prefer not to answer. This is more than ethics. It is energy management. Hidden costs collect interest. The propped-up image needs constant maintenance. The real self must keep stepping aside so the performance can continue, and the performance is always hungry. There is a different economy at work when integrity stands at the center. Integrity is not a halo, it's a moat that compounds trust, deals, and referrals. The image is architectural and practical at once. A moat does not make a castle pretty, it makes it safe. With honest structures in place, fewer alarms need to ring, fewer explanations need to be rehearsed, fewer fires need to be hidden. In emotional neuroscience, this reads as lower cognitive load and reduced sympathetic arousal, less time in fight-flight, more time in thoughtful choice. The mind recovers bandwidth that pretense had been renting at a predatory rate. Ancient language brings the metaphor into sharp focus. Honest scales. The righteous walk securely. The scale is an instrument that quietly dictates outcomes. When its measure is true, everything built on that measure becomes more reliable. Security here is not the absence of risk, it is the absence of deceit. Walking securely feels like a spine that lengthens, a chest that opens, a gaze that can meet other eyes without scanning for what might be known or suspected. It is the strength of being the same person in every room, so that decisions do not require costume changes and relationships do not require hazard pay. The fear that honesty will shrink opportunity often dissolves when reality is measured over seasons rather than moments. Trust is a compounding asset. It lowers friction at every turn. Conversations shorten because suspicion is not part of the budget. Negotiations soften because the other party's nervous system is not braced for the trapdoor. Creative work deepens because energy is no longer wasted on narrative control. Over time, the moat turns invisible to those inside it, not because it vanishes, but because safety becomes the new normal. Safety lengthens horizons. Long horizons improve choices. Better choices keep the water high. In the daily landscape, integrity wears plain clothes. It sounds like a clean yes and a clean no, spoken without theater. Some name this rhythm quietly: daily yes-no audit. Identify one area to say a clean yes and one to give a clean no, not as an order but as a posture. The nervous system reads this clarity as mercy. Yes gathers presence, no protects it. Yes gives a promise, no guards a boundary. Over weeks, the pattern reteaches the brain that commitments can be trusted and that the self does not need to be everywhere to be effective. The gain is subtle and cumulative. Fewer regrets to manage, fewer apologies to craft, fewer words to remember, because the truth is easier to recall. Teaching integrity protects. Protection here is not a wall against people, it is a shield against erosion. Without integrity, tiny leaks form wherever impression takes precedence over truth, and those leaks drain attention, time, and courage. With integrity, the same attention can be reinvested into building, refining, and repairing what genuinely matters. In psychological terms, dissonance reduces. The inner narrative becomes coherent. The parts of the mind stop arguing about the cost of keeping up appearances. Alignment is relief disguised as responsibility. The castle and moat image grows more vivid when the weather changes. On bright days, every structure looks sturdy. In storms, only the honest foundations hold. When pressure rises, a person with the habit of clean measure makes faster, cleaner choices because fewer variables are hidden and fewer words are diluted. Others feel the stability and lend their weight without fear of collapse. The reward is not just reputation, it is resilience. The quiet capacity to keep moving without constantly scanning the rearview mirror for the truth that was edited out of yesterday's story. A single line sits in the room like a kindly spotlight. What shortcut is currently taxing your future trust? The answer may be small, and small matters, Trust is paid in detail. When the scale is true in what seems trivial, the soul learns that security is not a someday prize, but a today practice. The ledgers balance differently. The body believes you, the mind rests. And in that rest, growth returns not as a gamble, but as the natural result of living in a way that does not require a second life to support the first. There is a flavor of exhaustion that ambition alone cannot explain, a weary heat that lingers even when results look impressive. The body carries its signature, tightness behind the eyes, a pulse that stays a notch too high, a calendar stuffed with commitments that arrived in a rush because earlier hours evaporated in delay. The sentence that names this ache lands with the relief of being seen, pain it hits, burnout from non-stop hustle, procrastination followed by frantic sprints. Hustle becomes a siren song that promises momentum while quietly stealing the very steadiness momentum requires, and procrastination becomes a tax that compounds in panic payments at the worst possible times. A different cadence interrupts the loop, gentle and firm. Expectation breaker, slow, steady systems outperform adrenaline-fueled pushes. The nervous system immediately recognizes the mercy in that claim. Adrenaline can launch a project. It cannot sustain a life. Emotional neuroscience describes the swap clearly. Moving from spike-driven urgency to rhythm-driven consistency lowers baseline cortisol, restores executive function, and turns attention into a renewable resource rather than a consumable one. In practice, this feels like an internal unclenching, a wider field of view, a calendar that stops ambushing you and starts collaborating. Ancient wisdom gives the pattern, a picture easy enough for a child to draw and deep enough to guide a leader. Solomonic lens, consider the ant. Prepare your work outside, then build your house. The verbs carry sequence. Consider, prepare, then build. No drama, no spectacle, just a quiet chain of actions that removes friction before it escalates. The ant's strength is not size, it is system. Preparation is not delay, it is design. Building is not resisted, it is timed. The soul hears the sanity in that order and begins to release the belief that worth is proven by perpetual strain. Across teams and seasons, a simple rhythm keeps showing its face, unflashy and profoundly stabilizing. Practice, the 1 hour block, 30 minutes of plan, 30 minutes of focused execution, no multitasking. The structure is modest on purpose. Half an hour to map the path, clear obstacles, and name what done actually means. Half an hour to travel that path with undivided attention, letting the brain enter deep work without being yanked back to the surface. The result is more than a completed task. It is a nervous system trained to trust that effort will be organized and organized effort will be honored. Over time, this hour behaves like compound interest, not because the minutes increase, but because the waste decreases. The dignity of this rhythm is how it speaks to both spirit and science. Spirit hears the call to faithfulness, small obediences to wise order that stack into strength. Science maps the mechanism, cue, routine, reward, so that habit loops form without fanfare. The ant image keeps working here. Tiny loads carried consistently surpass dramatic hauls that require recovery and repair. Planning serves execution the way good scaffolding serves a building. It seems invisible once the work rises, yet nothing rises straight without it. Teachings, so 4, diligence, plus 5, plan before you act. Diligence is not punishment. It is a kindness that momentum can trust. Planning is not control. It is mercy for tomorrow's self. Together they turn hope into a schedule and desire into design. In the brain, this pairing reduces context switching, the costly toggling that shreds focus, and increases time in flow, which the nervous system experiences as calm engagement rather than jagged effort. In the soul, The pairing replaces the identity of the one who tries hard with the identity of the one whose effort is wisely arranged. Enrichment takes on a new texture under this light. It feels less like a sprint toward a finish line that keeps sliding away and more like a pilgrimage with supplies packed, landmarks known, and companions chosen. The outer world may still deliver urgent moments, but urgency stops being the climate and becomes a weather pattern that passes. Work output stabilize, evenings grow quieter. The body trusts that the day will not eat itself. The mind trusts that meaning will not be sacrificed to busyness, and the heart trusts that building can be as humane as it is productive. A single question lingers, like a compass set gently in the palm. What small, repeatable system could replace your next sprint? As that question finds an honest answer, the ant's quiet wisdom moves from metaphor to muscle memory, and the path ahead stops demanding heroics and starts rewarding harmony. Distraction often wears the face of productivity. Tabs open, thoughts racing, emotions rising and receding like quick weather. Beneath the surface, an older pain murmurs. Conversations that turned sharp without warning, sentences that left a bruise, moments when the heart flooded and the tongue spent more than the soul could afford. The body remembers these collisions. Shoulders hold a flinch, breath shortens, sleep replays scenes that ended too quickly and burned too hot. The description lands with the clean honesty of a diagnosis finally named. Pain it hits, distraction, emotional volatility, conflict from careless speech. It is not a moral failure. It is a pattern with a cost. A gentler pattern appears when direction replaces intention as the true engine of change. The shift is quiet yet decisive. Expectation breaker, direction, intention. Words are steering wheels, not decorations. The nervous system understands this immediately. Direction calms because it narrows possibilities to what aligns with value. Language becomes a tool for trajectory rather than a vent for pressure. Emotional neuroscience traces the relief. When arousal lowers by even a small margin, the prefrontal cortex can guide the scene, keeping meaning intact while heat dissipates. Words stop leaking adrenaline and start carrying accuracy. The room changes temperature without losing warmth. Across the ancient pages, the center of the person is named with a clarity that refuses to be vague. Solomonic lens. Guard your heart. Life flows from it. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. The heart here is not sentiment. It is the spring that feeds the whole terrain. If the spring is muddied, every stream downstream carries that taste. Guarding the heart is thus less about walls and more about water, about tending the source so the flow remains clear. The tongue then becomes a channel, not a dam. A builder, not a wrecking crew. The stakes are immense and tender at once. Life or death carried in syllables that seem small until their harvest appears. Many who live this wisdom keep a quiet ritual that shapes both pace and speech. It has a simple name and a humane rhythm. Practice the triple gate. True, kind, necessary. Pause 3 seconds before any decisive message. The scale is intentional. 3 questions, 3 seconds. Enough friction to rescue meaning from momentum. Not so much that conversation loses its living warmth. The body appreciates the pause. It reads the gap as safety. The mind uses it to choose accuracy over impulse. Over time, those few seconds function like hidden guardrails on a mountain road, rarely noticed until the day they keep the car from the cliff. Teachings. Number 6. Guard your heart. Plus number 7, master your tongue. Together they form a deep alliance. Guarding the heart protects attention, and attention is the currency that purchases direction. Mastering the tongue protects relationships, and relationships are the riverbeds through which purpose actually travels. When both are aligned, storms still come, but less water is lost to erosion. The conversation can carry heat without burning. conviction without contempt, correction without collapse. The nervous system experiences this as coherence, parts of the self cooperating rather than competing, while the spirit experiences it as dignity, returned to places that had begun to feel brittle. Conflict changes shape under this light. It is no longer a battlefield where winning means wounding, but a workshop where truth is shaped into something both sturdy and humane. The triple gate does not silence strong sentences. It sculpts them. True does not become cruel. Kind does not become evasive. Necessary does not become noisy. Each gate disciplines a different temptation: the rush to be right, the urge to be liked, the fear of being clear. Passing through the three together restores balance. People leave the room with their worth intact and the work advanced. The inner landscape softens accordingly. Guarded attention reduces the constant pull of distractions that masquerade as obligations. The heart saves energy by refusing to host voices that only drain. Language then inherits this calm. Words emerge slower, warmer, cleaner. They stop spending tomorrow's trust to buy today's relief. Over months, identity shifts in a way that others can feel. Reliable presence, measured speech, a steadiness that de-escalates rooms before anyone names why. This is enrichment in its most human form. Peace that travels in sentences, clarity that travels in tone. A single question sets down roots in memory and grows a quiet orchard. If your words were seeds, what harvest are you planting today? Asked in the soft pause before speech, it tilts the steering wheel by a few degrees, which is often the difference between a crash and a conversation, a fracture and a future. In that small difference, the heart learns trust again, the tongue learns craft again, and life begins to flow where it once only flooded. When the threads are gathered, a quiet pattern emerges, human, repeatable, merciful. Wisdom does not rush the soul. It arranges it. The 7 pillars stand, and between them a small set of daily rhythms keeps the roof steady on ordinary days. Together, they lower noise, widen perspective, and turn scattered effort into compounding peace. The body feels it first as breath deepens and shoulders ease. Emotional neuroscience would call it reduced arousal and restored executive function. The spirit would simply say that order has come home. One gentle rhythm lives where words meet attention. Many keep a brief practice often called proverb pairing. A single proverb read slowly, followed by one honest sentence for the day ahead. The scale is kind on purpose. Meaning arrives in a size the nervous system can trust. Intention shapes attention, attention shapes behavior, and behavior lays a path the mind can walk again tomorrow without resistance. Roots before fruit, quietly, consistently. Perspective returns in community the way dawn returns to a dark room. A simple frame often proves strong, a circle of counsel with an elder, a peer, and a specialist, each offering a distinct kind of light during a short, respectful check-in. Different angles reduce perceived threat, shorten learning curves, and keep momentum from drifting into isolation. In the brain, this looks like steadier chemistry and greater cognitive flexibility. In the soul, it feels like relief with a spine. Plans hold better when many hands have measured the wood. Alignment protects the energy that real work requires. Some adopt a plain habit of review called the yes and no audit, naming one clean yes and one clean no for the day. The clarity is merciful. Yes gathers presence. No guards it. Over time, the inner accountant stops paying interest on disguised compromises. Fewer repairs are needed because fewer fractures are created. Honest measure stabilizes the room inside the chest. Trust grows because the self can finally predict the self. Momentum steadies when effort is wisely arranged. A common cadence is the single-hour block, the first half given to design, the second half to undivided execution. Planning becomes mercy for the future, rather than a detour from the work, and execution inherits calm from that mercy. Context switching falls, depth rises, and what once required adrenaline now proceeds under the gentler fuel of rhythm. The ant's wisdom proves itself again. Small loads carried steadily outlast dramatic hauls that demand recovery. Speech turns from shrapnel into architecture when the source is tended. The triple gate offers a living filter, True, kind, necessary, held with a brief pause before decisive words leave the mouth. The pause is short enough to preserve warmth and long enough to rescue meaning from momentum. Conversations keep their dignity. Relationships retain their strength. In the nervous system, those few seconds return guidance to higher reasoning. In the spirit, they return kindness to conviction. Woven together, these practices do more than improve days. They repair sequences. Wise input simplifies choice. Simplified choice reduces chaos. Reduced chaos frees attention. Free attention amplifies love, craft, and courage. Across weeks, the compound effect becomes visible in places that matter. Calmer rooms, clearer calendars, cleaner ledgers, warmer words. Across seasons, identity shifts from striving to stewardship, from hustling for worth to building from worth. Enrichment stops behaving like luck and starts behaving like harvest. The house stands because the foundations agree with the frame, and the frame agrees with the roof. Order holds. Peace multiplies. The path is ready for a final picture of roots becoming fruit in images the heart will not forget. A garden comes into view at first light, the kind of dawn that lifts color gently from the earth. In the center stands a tree with a trunk you could lean against for a long time without needing words. The roots run like quiet rivers beneath the soil, reaching for what feeds them before asking for anything to be seen. The fruit is not in a hurry. It shines because it was never forced. The air around the tree carries that particular stillness only living order can make. A stillness that invites the lungs to take deeper, slower breaths until the body remembers it was designed to rest and to rise in a measured rhythm. Along the ground, a small movement repeats itself, an ant tracing a path that seems simple until the pattern reveals its intelligence. Grain by grain, the load is sized to the strength of the moment, and the strength of the moment grows because the load is wisely chosen. There is no audience and no anthem, only the hum of work arranged in a way that conserves energy for the distance ahead. The path does not wander. It arcs between preparation and building as naturally as the day arcs between morning and night. Watching this unassuming traveler, it becomes clear that consistency is not a lesser courage. It is the kind of courage that keeps its promises. Not far from the tree, a set of scales rests on a smooth stone. The instrument looks ordinary, but its quiet accuracy organizes everything around it. Transactions soften under its honesty. Agreements become easier to hold. Even the wind seems to fall into a steadier cadence there, as if truth possesses its own gravity and the world relaxes when it is measured without hidden weights. The ground near the scales shows fewer footprints that double back in confusion, fewer scuffs from hurried reconsiderations, more clean lines that lead where they said they would lead. Beyond the scales, 3 chairs sit beneath an awning, shaped by years to fit the people who return to them. The oldest chair carries the patience of long winters and long harvests. The middle chair, the strength of shared burdens. The newest chair, the necessary precision of studied craft. Words exchanged here do not crowd the air, they clarify it. Faces loosen as blind spots turn into sight lines, and heavy choices become lighter because they are held by more than one set of hands. Even the shadows seem kinder under this shelter, the way shade turns from escape into resource when guidance is present. At the edge of the garden, a small work table holds tools already set in order. A sheet of paper rests beside them with lines that map the next simple build, not as a cage, but as a mercy to the future. There is a marked difference between labor that scrambles and labor that proceeds, and the difference is felt in the way shoulders settle before the first cut is made. A clock hangs nearby, not as a tyrant, but as a companion, its steady motion granting each task the dignity of its own moment, its own completion, its own quiet yes. A spring feeds the garden from a shaded rise, the water clear enough to reveal the stones that steady its flow. Nothing flashy happens here, yet everything depends on this clarity. When the heart is tended like this water, the whole landscape benefits. Paths grow soft and safe underfoot. Conversations drift toward ease rather than edge. The spring does not argue. it nourishes, and in doing so it becomes the unseen champion of fruit, of work, of counsel, of measure. To approach it is to understand why attention is called treasure, and why guarding the source is an act of love. Words move through this place like careful carpenters, selecting timber that will hold and joining it with joints that will last. Every sentence adds weight to what is being built or removes it. Every phrase is either a brace against collapse or a wobble that will later demand repair. The air holds fewer sharp edges because language has been asked to serve truth and kindness simultaneously, and the structure rising from the work table shows it, surfaces aligned, corners square, spaces prepared for people to inhabit without flinching. As the morning matures, the scene resolves into a single choreography. Roots draw quietly, while branches widen their reach. The ant continues its measured travel, and the pile it builds becomes useful before it becomes impressive. The scales keep their promise to measure without favor, and the three chairs wait for voices that make one another wiser. The plan on the table moves from ink to wood without panic, and the spring keeps sending clear water as if nothing could be more natural. The garden does not perform meaning, it produces it. Somewhere within the watcher, a matching order begins to form. Breath aligns with the tree's patience, attention aligns with the spring's clarity, effort aligns with the ant's rhythm, decisions align with the scale's honesty, relationships align with the chair's conversation, actions align with the paper's design, speech aligns with the builder's care. None of it shouts, yet all of it speaks, and what it says is simple enough to settle in the chest without struggle. Where wisdom arranges the unseen, life becomes strong enough to carry what matters in the open. The garden keeps its quiet, and something in you matches its pace. The tree is still teaching without words, roots first, fruit in season. The ant continues its measured work, reminding the body that consistency is a form of courage. The scales rest in their honesty, proving that alignment is a source of strength. The three chairs hold a space where perspective gathers like morning light. The work table waits with a plan that is mercy rather than pressure. The spring sends clear water from the shaded rise. Language moves through all of it like a careful builder, choosing what will hold and releasing what will fail. This is the picture that lingers when the noise fades, a life arranged from the inside out. Across this journey, patterns have replaced slogans. Wisdom before wealth has meant feeding what is unseen so that what is seen can endure. Counsel before isolation has turned decision-making from a cliff edge into a path with companion. Honest scales have traded performance for security, leaving the nervous system with bandwidth to create rather than conceal. The ant's diligence has broken the spell of adrenaline, replacing drama with rhythm. Preparation before action has rescued hours from repair and given them back to relationships and rest. Guarding the heart has protected attention, the most expensive currency in the room. Mastery of the tongue has transformed speech from shrapnel into structure. Nothing here is loud, everything here is strong. The ache that arrived at the beginning, exhaustion that looked like success, busyness that felt like importance, wins that came at the cost of the person winning, meets another kind of wealth now. The body recognizes it first, breath that reaches the bottom of the lungs. Shoulders that stop bracing for the next sudden turn. The mind follows, fewer alarms to manage, more light where choices are made. Emotional neuroscience would say that arousal has lowered, executive function has returned, and habit loops have begun to bend toward peace. The spirit would say that order has come home and brought courage with it. When a life is arranged this way, outcomes change texture. Gains become sturdier because they are built on coherence rather than strain. Relationships deepen because words no longer spend tomorrow's trust to buy today's relief. Work stabilizes because plans honor limits instead of resenting them. Creativity brightens because energy once trapped in pretense is freed for making. Even setbacks behave differently. They are still real, still costly, but they happen inside a frame that can bear weight. Recovery shortens, lessons stick, hope grows a spine. What rises now is not a command, but a recognition. Attention gravitates toward one practice that feels alive, one teaching that keeps echoing, one image that keeps returning. Some notice the draw of that simple chair where counsel meets courage. Others feel the pull of honest measure, where the scale stops wobbling and the room steadies. Many find themselves lingering by the spring, understanding that the clarity of the source decides the future of the streams. Recognition is enough. What the soul can see, the life can eventually grow. This is the point where legacy stops being a distant word and becomes a daily texture. Generosity no longer leaks through unguarded attention. It flows through a tended heart. Leadership no longer strains to keep the appearance together. It rests on the integrity that does not require a second life to maintain the first. Prosperity stops acting like a chase scene and starts acting like a harvest. Quiet work over honest time, roots doing what roots do, fruit arriving when fruit should. Listen then for the sentence that has been walking beside you since the first moment, the one that sounds like a bell and feels like a door. What if the richest wisdom in history is not about money, but about decisions that print compound interest across your entire life? Let it settle where decisions are born. Let it become the measure and the metronome, the question that keeps the room honest and the pace humane. If the garden you have seen today begins to grow inside you, even quietly, even slowly, the kind of enrichment that does not erode has already begun.